Hello and welcome to Just Keep Writing, the video podcast in which I, Kris Ripper, talk about all the things to do with writing when I should be writing, but I'm not writing. In case I haven't mentioned this before, and it's really only just occurred to me now that I had like a very clear inspiration for this idea, I used to listen to Mur Lafferty's I Should Be Writing years and years ago. I don't even remember when, but it was like, I think she was doing that before like podcasts existed in the form they exist today. It was just a thing that I used to listen to. This is how long ago this is. I would get the notification that there was a new episode of that show through Google Reader. So this was the heyday of Google Reader. This is when Google had all sorts of crazy shit. They had Google Wave, like rest in peace Google Wave. Hats off. That was a great thing. But Mur Lafferty, a spec fic writer, had this great podcast called I Should Be Writing, and I fucking loved it. It was fantastic. There was an episode, I haven't listened to it in a million years. There was an episode she did about revising, which was so goddamn funny. She went through this whole dramatization of what past her had written, like, you know, I don't remember exactly what it was. It was like create a cocktail or something. It was like, you know, just a note to herself, like, when I'm revising, I'll do this thing that I don't want to do right now, come up with all these fictional worlds or whatever that I'm not doing right now. And it was so goddamn funny and so on target. So in case I haven't given all due respect to Mur Lafferty, this would not exist except that I really loved listening to her talk about writing and the process of writing and creating and doing all the things. Having said that, today we're going to talk about procrastination. It's one of those things that really applies across many areas of life. You can procrastinate about many things. I was in the collections, the DMV collections for many years because I just couldn't get my shit together to like go to the DMV and get out of collections. I'm no longer in DMV collections, just in case anyone's concerned. Procrastination is a thing. I would say especially for those of us who are super anxious, but I don't know that that's true. I think my ADHD friends would say especially for ADHD folks. I think procrastination affects everyone to varying degrees and about varying things. I am much less likely to procrastinate writing a novel than I am a short story. And that's absurd, particularly in this case because I have these outstanding stories that I owe my wonderful patrons on Patreon, patreon.com/Kris Ripper. Thank you. And I love writing these stories. I can't even express, I built my Patreon around the fact that I was already writing all these stories and I was giving them away. And I was like, you know, I want them to be free ultimately, but maybe people will want to support my work and I'll just like put up a Patreon. And if they don't, that's fine. They can still get all the freebies and they get everything after a year. But like, if you want them sooner, you can support my work. And people really responded to that. Having said that, now, a few years later, I procrastinate about writing these stories that I really fucking love writing. So this is not, I guess this is a different flavor of procrastination from procrastinating about the DMV. Hi, Blakey. Okay, boo, I'm making a video. Because this is not procrastinating about something I ultimately don't want to do. This is that flavor of procrastination that is like, why am I not just doing it? I don't even have to think up these stories. I know exactly the stories that I'm going to write for these. I'm like 3 or 4 Patreon stories behind. One of them is almost done. It's like 1,200 words in. I could end it any second now, and I just haven't done it. That is from April. It's now July as I'm recording this, and I just haven't finished it. And obviously I could list all the reasons that might have gone into this. There are a lot of other things happening that are overwhelming, but ultimately it's just procrastination. So if you, like me, also suffer from that feels a little bit overwrought, If you also experience procrastination about doing things you ultimately really look forward to doing, here are some thoughts I've had on this process. So now we've covered the idea of procrastination as a normal thing that affects us all. Let's talk about it more. So sometimes it's helpful to know why you're procrastinating. I don't always find this helpful. I think that for me, at least, it's generally kind of the same reasons over and over again. So some of those are the basics: fear of failing at whatever it is, fear of succeeding at whatever it is. Sometimes that's even scarier. There's all the usual day-to-day stressor excuses that I use for myself, like I had a bad night, which is every night, or I don't have enough time this week. There's too many appointments. There's this, there's that. There's a lot of things going on. I need to do this yard work project before it gets cold or before it gets hot. There's a lot of things that can get in the way that may or may not be directly related to the thing about which you are procrastinating. And then there's the actual huge overarching life situations that uproot everything, like an illness or someone passing away. These are things that even if you don't feel directly impacted by them in the moment, they could still be getting in your head and making it harder for you to do things even when you really want to do them. And I think it's super important to really honor that that's a process that happens, that you can't necessarily just decide you won't be affected by things. I'm making a fucking video. And B, to try not to, I'm trying to think of a sensitive way to say this, because it sounds like a shitty thing to say, like, try not to let that thing become the reason you don't do anything. And obviously, I am saying this as someone who is deeply, deeply affected by both depression and anxiety. So I'm not saying, like, don't honor your depression and anxiety and the things that keep you from doing things, like you can just willpower your way out of it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying keep it in your head that taking action is often better for everything than not taking action. So, and I could be projecting, but sometimes I do let like genuinely fucked up things kind of become a snowball that like gathers up all the things that I wish I was doing, and I just sort of flatten like a pancake underneath it all and decide that I'm done and I'm just going to watch like 7 seasons of Hoarders or Alone or something. Season 9 of Alone right now, just FYI in case anyone's wondering. But as long as you kind of are acknowledging where you are and what your process is, you're probably fine. That may be just a thing that I tend to do. So there's the usual excuses, the day-to-day stuff. There's the actual upheaval stuff that's really big. Losing a job, changing jobs, moving, all of those things that take huge amounts of mental and emotional and physical energy. But ultimately, you still want to do this thing. So let's talk about how you get there. So for me, we know that I love writing down lists. I set a 5 or 10 minute timer. I write down all the reasons that I'm giving myself for why I'm not doing this thing. I'm not writing my April Patreon story for 3 fucking months, because we're buying this property and there's a lot of issues with the escrow and there's this and that and the other thing. So are those valid reasons to not write the last literally 300 words of this story and post it? I don't know. But a big part of this process for me is learning not to judge myself and be super critical of myself, because that's so easy for me to do. And I'm trying to get better at self-compassion and about just really ultimately trying not to judge myself for things I wouldn't judge someone else for. I wouldn't judge you for being 3 months behind on your Patreon story. So why do I go into a shame spiral about it for me when it's something that I know I could just do if I just fucking did it? We're processing. So even though you have a list of reasons, and some of them will be 100% valid and true, others will probably, I can't complain about having a bad night of sleep. My whole life has been bad nights of sleep. There's a degree to which I should never, ever use that as an excuse for anything, because I could use it every day if I wanted to. So you're going to have a mix of reasons with different levels of what you might call validity. But every time you start thinking about this thing that you want to do and are procrastinating about, here's the challenge that I am giving to you. Instead of saying XYZ reasons, even when they're completely true, say, I'm choosing not to do this thing right now. Which sounds a little bit crazy. And I want to be very clear that you really can only get to this point if you are able to not be super, super judgmental of yourself, but reframing it so it's a choice, so that it's a thing that you have control over, can be this crazy, crazy, powerful thing to do. I love reframing. For me, I find it very helpful. I know it can seem a little cheap, a little silly, but it works in my brain, and anything that works in your brain, you should fucking take advantage of, right? So I love to reframe. When I start thinking, I can't believe I'm 3 stories behind. One of my huge things this year was to keep up with it. Like, I've started again. I was recommitted, blah, blah, blah. I have to take a moment and I have to think, I've chosen to get here. I can choose to get out of here. And that's what it comes down to. So I like to reframe, and it sometimes also works to get me going. So if I say I'm choosing not to do this right now, I could just as easily say I'm choosing to spend the next 10 minutes on this. Usually, and some of this is just kind of project management stuff, but there's usually sort of corollary tasks that go along with the things that we might be procrastinating about. So maybe I can take 10 minutes and make a cover for that story, or I can do the metadata, or I can do a post and just not upload anything and publish it yet. So there are a lot of different things. If I'm writing a book, usually I can go in and take a couple of notes on what I know is going to happen in this chapter, or I can think up one really exciting thing, always in dialogue for me, almost always, that I'm going to get to write in this upcoming chapter. So if you can come up with enough of those real small things that are they just get you in, they just get you going, and they just kind of prime your brain to think, I'm a person who's doing this thing, which I find helpful. Doing all of this without judgment is super key. In terms of just living life, I think the more often you can practice not being really self-critical, and this is if you have a self-criticism issue like so many of us do, you just build that skill. And I think it's really, really helpful to build that skill. I have seen a lot of, I'm going to call them success narratives, which seem to me to come down to it's the kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing. If your entire attitude is like, quitting is wrong and I'm not giving up and blah, 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 maybe that's helpful for you. But what it looks like to me is that if you have a bad day, you're going to judge real hard. And probably you're going to judge other people real hard, even if you don't really know their circumstances for not accomplishing the same things that you have accomplished. And none of that seems all that healthy to me. So as often as possible, I try to go in with low judgment, or at least better judgment than I used to have. If the bar is low enough, you can get better pretty easily. And I just try to keep in mind that I have done a lot and I will continue to do a lot. And if today is not the day I finish that goddamn last 300 words of that April story, today is not the day. That's a choice I've made, and it's going to be fine. Obviously, on the less philosophical side, set a timer, list all the little tiny tasks that are related to that big thing that you haven't done, and see if any of them are doable right now, just to get back into the game. Half of the psychology of doing big projects for me is just my brain approaching it with the idea that I can keep going. which is what this whole series is about. Just keep writing, right? So whatever that is for you, a huge, huge part of the puzzle is just practicing the mindset that you can keep going. In conclusion, as if I ever have a conclusion, procrastination, even about the things you really like to do, totally, completely normal, right? Everybody experiences it. Try not to be really critical of yourself for procrastinating about things. Step 2. I don't think I had a step 1. Anyway, step 1 is don't be critical of yourself. Step 2, list all your reasons for not doing the thing. Step 3, reframe as I am choosing not to do this thing right now, and it's okay. That's it. That's the whole process. Did I tell you how to do the thing? I did not, because I don't know what that looks like for you. For me, it often looks like this. I was watching a TV show. I finished my iced coffee. I stood up. I knew that make this video was on my list of things to do today. I thought of all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, which is like the next hour and a half it's going to take me to figure out how to transfer these files to my other computer where I have my editing software, which is like every single time I do this, apparently I have to do it a different way. I don't understand, but our internet connection is not strong enough to simply Wi-Fi transfer it. Anyway, long story short, I thought of all the reasons why not to do this, and then I thought, do I want to say to myself right now, I'm choosing not to make this video when I love making videos? No, I don't want to say that right now. So I made a fucking video. Now I'm going to turn all my fans back on and turn off all these lights because it's really goddamn hot in here and I'm sweating. But here we are. So whatever that process looks like for you, feel it out. Try not to judge yourself. Everyone procrastinates. But I hope that this has inspired you to take one small step towards whatever the thing is that you want to do but have been procrastinating about. Anyway, you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/KrisRipper. I'm on the Instagram at something. I'm on the Facebook. You can find my Facebook group at KrisRipper.com/irregulars, and you can come hang out with us there. I'm sure I'm other places, but, these are the main ones, and I will see you around. Thank you so much for watching/listening today and spending some time with me. See you next time. Bye.